The Lemonade Car Show is sponsored by OMVIC, Ontario's vehicle sales regulator. Welcome to the Lemonade Car Show. I'm your host, Lorraine Sommerfeld. We're brought to you by OMVIC and Crown, joined today by Michael Turk and John Raymond. They're both with the APA. Michael is our legal consultant. He's our lawyer. This is a very fun show and one you should all pay attention to, because this is what happens before something goes wrong, tips of what to do, and of course what happens after everything's gone sideways. So, Michael, let's start out with what people, when we're going into a dealership, I'm going to ask you the first question. I sign a contract. What's my cooling off period?
Your cooling off period doesn't exist.
Thank you. Okay, we need to say this 15 times.
Once you sign, you own.
You own.
And as a matter of fact, when OMVIC changed the bill of sale, there's actually a statement on the bill of sale that now says that this is a binding agreement once you've signed it.
Okay.
But unfortunately, it's part of the verbiage that's in every contract, and most consumers don't read it.
So read your contract, and there's no cooling off period when you have purchased a car. So don't sign if you don't plan on buying that car.
Right, and don't fall for the give me a deposit in order for me to give you an offer or the best price on that car.
Okay. John?
That's correct.
That's correct.
Everything that he says. Saying that, a good retailer will work with the consumer, and many consumers, although they've signed and they have specific situations that have come up, a retailer will either provide their deposit back or keep the limited deposit and let the consumer walk. Okay, it's a definite rule, okay, and it's a regulation and it's a fact, but there are good retailers out there that understand that things change, and it's a good business practice to help somebody leave.
I think one of the problems we have here in Canada is because our media bleeds across the border so easily and it's all kind of homogenous. We hear a lot about lemons and lemon laws and all that thing. I know in the state to state, they're all different. They all have their own applications of lemon laws. Canada doesn't work that way. Can you explain, Michael, how Canada works with lemons?
Well, there's no federal legislation or provincial legislation that talks about specifically lemons. So you fall under consumer protection law, and again, that applies to all types of products. It's not specific to cars. So if you have a problem with your vehicle, you actually have to rely either upon the common law, which is basically piecemeal with respect to cars, or you go through the arbitration process.
Or sometimes goodwill before it gets to that level. There are some
okay, he's
brands.
making a face as you said
That's
goodwill.
okay. That's okay. I've seen both sides of the fence. At one time being a retailer and now, being an advocate. There are times where consumers have a problem with their vehicle and a dealership or a brand will step up to bat. But, he's entitled to his face because usually that doesn't happen.
He's entitled to his face.
Yeah.
I mean, the first things that the dealers will tell you is that's why we have a warranty on your car. So bring the vehicle back and we'll fix it under warranty. And then it's by the second or third or fourth time that they're fixing the same problem that you still get the same reaction from the dealer. Hopefully they're giving you a car at no cost while your vehicle's in the shop.
You have to push for that at a lot of dealers. Now, do you have a right to that, or can you just ask and hope they'll do it? This is a really common question I get.
It's a goodwill gesture by the dealer. And depending on the nature of your problem, the manufacturer usually will step up to the bat. So if it's a transmission or an engine problem that you're going to be without your vehicle maybe for up to a month, they usually always give you a car.
It's brand dependent, depending on the brand. Certain brands say if your car's in for actual physical service of more than 5 hours, they provide a complimentary courtesy car. Other ones, you're walking. Once again, if you go into that dealership and you advise them beforehand that you need alternate transportation, most good dealerships will help you out in that area.
Okay, what's the best approach? I bought a car, I'm having a problem, it's going in for the third time. I walk in there, how am I going to get the best result?
So let's talk about steps before you would go to an arbitration process that we'll talk in the next segment or go legal. Number one is know your rights. Read your warranty manual, understand what the regulations are in place. Number two, document and understand what your problem is. That may mean taking video. That may be getting a second party to acknowledge that they heard a noise or there is a problem. Specifically, when you go to the service center, the dealership, you know how they have you sign what's called a work order or a repair order. Make sure you get copies of those. Sometimes they say, no, you don't need a copy, it's a comeback.
Because if that's not closed out, then it doesn't exist.
It does, okay? They could give you a photocopy of where you sign your name or what the technician did. The more documentation you have, the more second-party observance of your issue, the quicker the chance that your problem will be dealt with.
Okay, but the other thing that you want to do, though, is you want to do your homework on the nature of the problem. So, for example, if you have a transmission problem that is unique to your vehicle, that's one thing. But if it's common across the brand, you have a lot more strength when you're sitting down with the dealer.
Okay, so you can go online and find out people having similar problems with it?
Or you go to an independent. And, I mean, there are certain brands out there now that have notorious problems with transmissions.
Yeah.
And when you show up at the dealership with a problem with one of them, they should not be giving you a hard time.
Because they already know.
Right.
So that's one of the questions is, one of the points is do research.
Yeah.
Also, staying calm, and going to a dealership and asking for the right personnel to help them, acknowledging that they didn't manufacture the car, that they're servicing your car and fulfilling the requirements of the manufacturer is important.
Okay, when we come back, we're going to talk about escalation, because I love when you get to do this and the right way to escalate your problem. We'll be right back with more Lemonade Car Show. The Lemonade Car Show is sponsored by OMVIC, Ontario's vehicle sales regulator. The Lemonade Car Show is sponsored by OMVIC, Ontario's vehicle sales regulator. Welcome back to the Lemonade Car Show, brought to you by OMVIC Crown, Hotspot Auto Parts, and Sound Insurance. I'm joined by Michael Turk, our legal person, our lawyer, and John Raymond. They're both with the APA. We were going to get into CAMVAP, which is Canadian Motor
Vehicle
Arbitration Program. There we go. All right, ask me OMVIC, not CAMVAP. I get mixed up.
It's a little known.
Yeah, it's another acronym that a lot of people just kind of flies over their head, but that is a layer of protection or somebody that can authorize a buyback. Can you walk through? You can start with Michael. You're familiar with CAMVAP.
Well, I mean, first of all, your vehicle has to qualify for CAMVAP. So, correct me if I'm wrong, John, it's the current model year plus 4?
It's 4 years from September the 30th or September the 1st of the year, so now it's through to 2019. I would guess if it's when
you can go on the CAMVAP website.
Yeah.
You have to qualify within 4 years.
And it's 160,000 kilometers. So it's 4 years or 160,000
so
kilometers.
If you're within that, you start there if you've had ongoing issues.
Right.
So it's an arbitration process. So essentially what you're doing is you're preparing like you're going to trial, but you're doing it yourself in front of an arbitrator. And so when I say prepare that you're going to trial, you have to have your expert witness, you have to have all your documents, and you have to then satisfy the arbitrator that your vehicle has such a problem that cannot be fixed, that you're entitled to compensation. So the plan can offer to order repairs on the vehicle, or they can actually go so far as ordering a buyback on the vehicle. And the statistics are the buybacks are extremely rare. The majority of the work tends to be, the majority of the orders tend to be ordered to be done by the manufacturer.
So my question then to you is, if they're ordering a repair, wouldn't they have already repaired it if they could have? Because I've heard of people that have gone 7 times for the same thing, and there doesn't seem to be a magic number for how many times this has to make my...
It depends on the nature of the problem. So sometimes it's just inherent to the design. If it's a design issue that may not be covered per se in that, such as a navigation system issue would be example. If it's a true mechanical or problem that just can't be repaired, that's something else. But to Michael's point, actually there have been more and more cases that have been won recently by consumers. But a buyback is not necessarily a wonderful thing, because if somebody's had their car 6 months or a year, they take a depreciation schedule. They don't pay for extended warranties. They do not pay for add-ons if you add accessories at the dealership. So there is a financial loss for that consumer if there is a buyback?
To me, it begs the question is, I'm not sure how much of a fan I am of the arbitration process in Canada. And I say that because when I study the American states that have good lemon laws, the laws are specific as to what you're going to get back and what will qualify you for a mandatory buyback. It's not discretionary. So for example, there's certain components in California that if your vehicle has been in the shop for 2 repairs on the same item and it's potentially safety related, it's an automatic buyback. We don't have that type of wording in Canada. So it really is up to each specific arbitrator at CAMVAP to decide whether or not you qualify for the buyback.
We also know that some manufacturers are more amenable than others when it comes to stepping up for recalls, stepping up for safety warnings, like all kinds of things. Some will do it ahead of time before it's released. Some will fight kicking and screaming before they'll actually do it.
If we go back to the first segment, you have to be prepared. You have to give the dealership the opportunity to try and repair it. You have to escalate it to the brand by notifying the brand through customer service that you've had a problem. You have to track all your paper flow. You have to ask the dealership to bring in a brand specialist, a service rep on the road that works for that brand to check the car. Getting a third-party verification is worth it through an independent garage where you get a report from an independent technician saying, I saw the issue, I didn't see the issue, this is what it is. Looking online, once again, car complaints, other places to see if there were similar problems. The better prepared you are, the calmer you are, usually the better the results. But it's difficult. You're going into arbitration process. The brand is showing up with their either legal personnel and they're refuting all your claims.
See, I
so
think
having
that's
timelines,
overwhelming.
things like that. Oh, it is.
And I think that's kind of BS-y. Like, sorry, maybe there's a better word
Listen,
for it.
one of the reasons why I'm not a big fan of the process, my view is you should never have to get to CAMVAP to begin with. So if you have a defective engine, and the last case that I worked on for a consumer going to CAMVAP, they had their engine replaced 4 times. And we were ultimately successful at CAMVAP on that issue, but I'm still angry that we had to go that far. That, you know, the automaker fought back tooth and nail to force us to go to CAMVAP. There was no reason why it should not have settled before that process. There are certain things, you know, that to me are cut and dry, and that is, if you have a defective engine and the automaker knows that they've got a problem with a specific engine, then don't force somebody to go to CAMVAP on it.
Yeah.
And I know when CAMVAP first started, you know, there was a reluctance of automakers not so much to participate, but they didn't want to have the rulings publicized. So they would force you to go to CAMVAP, and then they would settle with you before the hearing so that there was no record of that. And again, it defeats the purpose of having what should be a consumer-friendly arbitration process that you're turning it adversarial.
Well, plus it feels like cannons and pea shooters. We'll be back after this break with more Lemonade Car Show. The Lemonade Car Show is sponsored by OMVIC, Ontario's vehicle sales regulator. The Lemonade Car Show is sponsored by OMVIC, Ontario's vehicle sales regulator. Welcome back to the Lemonade Car Show. I'm Lorraine Sommerfeld. I'm with Michael Turk and John Raymond with the APA. We're talking legal matters and, well, legal don't matters? I'm not sure. It's a bit of a patchwork here, sometimes in Canada. I think what I'm getting from this conversation is mostly do a lot of homework before you buy the car, because after the fact it can get really tenuous and a little sticky. And we're talking about CAMVAP, which can order a buyback. It's rare, and it's also overwhelmingly emotionally tough to go through this unless you're a lawyer or an advocate who works in the industry. Michael, we were talking in the break, and I want you to pick up about the parts that you're not thrilled with, or the concerns you have for consumers who do have a...
Well, one of the biggest problems with consumers per se is they think they can do it on their own. And they don't want to spend the money or the time to retain somebody who's qualified to go with them. So it makes a world of difference if you have an expert with you when you're going to CAMVAP.
Who would be an expert? Like, give me a range of you would presume would be a good expert to take with you or ask or pay.
Well, it depends on what the nature of the repair is.
Okay.
But for example, if you wanted to take somebody like me with you, I mean, who's an expert in the legal side but is also an automotive expert. So we speak the same language as CAMVAP and as the arbitrator.
Okay.
But unfortunately, most consumers don't want to invest the money in having the proper professionals go with them because it becomes expensive, and CAMVAP will not reimburse you for your legal costs.
And
if
see,
you
that's the
wait.
problem, because I'm thinking that's not fair. Why do I have to pay, what, $5,000 or something for a car that the manufacturer, it's their fault? Again, that's what I'm thinking. So I understand people saying, wait a minute, I'm going to be out of pocket an awful lot of money. And again, it comes down to how badly do you want to settle this thing. But it doesn't seem fair. So do we need different laws? Do we need better laws?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, the same thing applies to small claims court. In the early years when I was with the APA, we put together a program that allowed consumers to retain me at a very affordable rate to take the case from the beginning to end and go to trial for them. The number of consumers that took me up on that was under 10.
What?
This was over a 10-year period, and I'll be candid with you, I did it for $500.
What? And you even wore a tie.
This and this was
That's worth $1,000.
no, and even then, I did a flat fee of $500 plus plus disbursements, so whatever we had to pay for filing fees and so on. And we did that to try to encourage consumers to become more proactive and give them a resource for it. Nobody took advantage of it, and to this day, the people that did thought that $500 was too much money to pay.
Do you think maybe that's changed, though? I would think that's changed because it's become so complex, what we're arguing, especially if it's electronic systems and stuff. The cars are so much more complex that I would think people now would be going, even at $1,000, it's a deal. Or
But there are avenues. One of the avenues is joining the Automobile Protection Association.
and turning down his offer of
No, and getting advice where we'll help you through the process. We'll tell you the steps involved. We'll make you better educated. So from day one, when you're dealing with the dealership service department, maybe you'll get some resolve. So we are definitely there to help our members in advocacy and in educational.
Okay, let's back up this conversation just a little bit from the CAMVAP stuff where everyone's losing and angry and putting out too much money. I've bought a car and 3 months in, something's going sideways, they've fixed it twice. At the dealer level, they've contacted the manufacturer already. Manufacturers will open a ticket. You're dealing with two people, a dealer and a manufacturer usually, and the manufacturer will open up a ticket, so that's their file as well as the dealer. Who should you be dealing with and how? So before we get to CAMVAP stuff, in the early
go
goings.
through that process. So a consumer comes in, says they have a noise on a car. They will deal with their service advisor, the person traditionally at a counter or a desk. If there's no resolve, the consumer will say, should say, let me go out on a road test with your technician or the service advisor so you could hear that problem or experience it, or I have a video.
Now let me get a stamp that says unable to duplicate the problem.
Right. Yeah. I have those in my truck. So then the consumer will say, okay, I've been here twice. There's an issue. I would like you to see if there's a technical service bulletin in this issue. Have you seen this before? And please contact the manufacturer's technical service department to see how they could address this.
You can also look those up yourself, right? You can find those?
Yes and no. Sometimes they're available, sometimes they're not.
Secret? Okay.
So that would entail, now we're at 3 visits.
Yeah.
You need a lot of patience.
Well, it's not like anyone has a day job or anything. I mean, this is
You know, my previous vehicle, I think I went through. They changed the software on the new on the audio system, and I know within the first 30 or 60 days the radio failed, just died, and then they put in a replacement one, but then they couldn't, because it was so new. It took 6 months to get a replacement of the replacement, and there was a problem with that.
So now we're podging on computer parts.
Yeah, so right. So within the first 6 months, and fortunately, I do have the flexibility during most days, so that it wasn't a problem for me. But if you work from 9 to 5, I don't know how you get this resolved.
You know what, just acknowledging that's a big deal because a lot of people can't even get that acknowledged. We're going to be back after this break with more Lemonade. Lemonade Car Show is sponsored by OMVIC, Ontario's vehicle sales regulator. The Lemonade Car Show is sponsored by OMVIC, Ontario's vehicle sales regulator. Welcome back to Lemonade. I'm Lorraine Sommerfeld. I'm with Michael Turk and John Raymond of the APA, and we're talking about when your car kind of blows up and you want to get your money back or at least get the problem rectified. Michael, before we went to break, you acknowledged that you have to be patient and that it's stressful and it's not fair and it's very difficult in a lot of cases to get help. I think it's really important that people hear that, yeah, they're right. Even though they're not getting the response they want, this industry has a way of sweeping those people away or not listening to them. And you can go on forums and hear this. I hear people, and they write to all of us saying, what do we do? It's a big deal to hear somebody in the industry say, I had huge problems with this.
I had two on. I had a motor problem too. But you know what? Let's turn and look at this as a devil's advocate. There's one issue here that should be raised, is that consumers also have to understand the vehicle that they're buying. They have to read their owner's manual. A lot of consumers go back with very sophisticated cars now, and they go to a dealership and they say, there's something wrong with the car. I hate my car. It's a lemon. Well, why? It's shaking on the highway, and the service department writes a repair order and can't find the problem. Of course it's shaking on the problem. They have lane departure. So they bought a safety system, and when they get out of the lane, it shakes. Or the steering wheel shakes, or the seat shakes. So we're seeing a lot of this. Dealers can't claim that time. The consumers didn't take delivery of their car properly or listen to the product demonstration. They didn't read the material. They think they have a lemon. In truth, its systems are working fine. So we've seen that in safety systems. We've seen it in infotainment system, navigation, those kinds of things. So it's, yeah, me too. But it's really important that for our consumers, especially now with the complexity of these vehicles, it's not a simple 5 minutes all are in the car. To know what they have so they can ascertain, is this normal or not? And if it does bother them, like the lane keep assist, which is a safety feature, there's a switch to turn it off. You have to turn it off every time.
Devil advocate you then, because I hear what you're saying. Those are easy fixes. That's education. That's not anything under the hood. You know, that's like, guess what? Your seat's vibrating because you left the lane.
But
First
it's a
time
double
that happens,
process.
it is. But when my vehicle stalls on the highway at highway speed and I've got 3 kids in the back and you're telling me I can't duplicate the problem and we've never heard of it before, the biggest lie on the planet, I swear, is when some manufacturers say we've never heard of it before. And you go online and you're going, all these people say they've got open tickets with XYZ. They know that this exists, but it's to their best interest to say it doesn't. And this is why we're not sponsored by manufacturers, because some of them make me really cranky when they do this. And I've got people writing to me going, my car stalls. And this is lots of brands. Stalling is not an odd thing.
This is a common occurrence, especially lately.
Yeah, and we've got cars catching on fire. I drive one of them. So there's things happening. But why is the consumer always made to feel
small? Like they're crazy.
Yeah.
What are you talking?
Yeah.
Yeah, that couldn't possibly happen. We've never heard about the losing power on the 401.
Yeah, like that's...
My engine expired on the 401.
And John's right. We do have to know our cars, and the car you drive today, if the last one you bought was 8 years ago or something, it is a whole new ballgame. Like, that car is so different top to bottom. It's going to take a while to get used to it. It's like getting a new computer. I understand all that. Why are we so, why are we dealing with such contrary, sometimes people? Does it keep their costs down to be able to turf us out the window? Like,
sometimes the brands don't have an answer, unfortunately, or they haven't been escalated. The dealer personnel sometimes don't have a good vehicle to, so to speak, to fix this problem. They don't have the relationship with the brand. The brand doesn't have the documentation or the tooling. The time to fix certain problems, like software problems, is significantly longer than maybe a mechanical issue. So there's all these things into play. Unfortunately, the communication process is terrible. If there is a problem and they know that this percentage of their fleet is having this problem, but they don't have a problem yet, they don't have a solution, I should say, they should be notifying those owners and saying, we have a problem, we are working on it, this is the process that we go through. We should be able to deal with this in the next 6 months.
that would go a long way. That's like my kid admitting he did something wrong. It's like you get thumped once if you tell me the truth, and twice if you lie to me. Like, just tell me what's going on.
Exactly.
So,
And the dealers are the frontline people that have to deal with the consumer, and they're not getting the proper backing.
so there can be a
documentation.
disconnect between the dealer and the manufacturer. So
Oh,
we have
absolutely.
to anticipate that it's not always the dealer's fault.
What's interesting though is that you're not going to satisfy the consumers. See, the consumer is going to say, "What are you talking about? You don't know what the problem is. You're the manufacturer.
Yeah.
That's unacceptable that you put
Okay.
a system into the car that's not functioning properly."
We're going to have to do another show like this, I think, because we've got a lot in and we still have a lot to do. That's it for Lemonade. I'm Lorraine Sommerfeld. I've been with Michael Turk and John Raymond. Thanks to our sponsors, Omvik, Crown, Hotspot Auto Parts, and Sound Insurance. Thank you, gentlemen. We'll see you next time.